So although leaving Iraq is necessary, it is not a plan. It does not answer the two-word question any responsible man or woman who wishes to lead this great country has to be able to answer, in my humble opinion. And the two-word question is, then what? Serve the troops. Then what? Cut the troops. Then what? Cut off the funding for Iraqi army. Then what? Cut off the funding for the war. Then what? Ladies and gentlemen, we must have a plan what we're going to leave behind so that America's interests are protected. We don't just simply traded a dictator for chaos. There's one basic idea that just about everyone shares, Democrat and Republican. As a matter of fact, unfortunately, there's kind of two basic ideas they share. The first idea everyone is now acknowledging is something you've heard me say if you're a Sunday morning junkie and watching me on the morning shows on Sunday and today's show and all these other shows for the past 5 years. You've heard me say 100 times. There is no military solution in Iraq. There is only a political solution in Iraq. Everyone now says that. Everyone. Democrat, Republican, President, all the candidates, and those who are not candidates for president. But ladies and gentlemen, how we leave Iraq is going to require that political settlement. And yet, ask yourself the question, why am I the only candidate in either political party that has laid out a detailed plan, a political plan to end the war in Iraq, a political solution? Surely it's not because I'm the only guy that knows anything about this. I know I'm getting the benefit and the downside of being the expert on foreign policy. The press is now, it's kind of fascinating. I'm an expert in foreign policy means I can't know anything about anything else. Well, ladies and gentlemen, surely it's not that. Why is it? Well, I'll tell you why other people haven't put out political plans. For the same reason some of the real smart guys and women around me told me not to put one out. What happens? What have we learned in a world where you put out a detailed plan that just sits up there as a target? You become the subject rather than the problem. Or, God forbid, your plan is adopted and it fails, you're done. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I go back to my opening statement. I'm not running to hear hail the chief. I'm ready to figure out how to end this damn war. I'm ready to figure out how we put this nation back in a position of being a world leader for peace. And ladies and gentlemen, there is a political solution to Iraq. But unfortunately, another thing my colleagues in both parties have in common who've spoken on this, they all operate with the same strategic flaw, well-intended. And think of what that is. And I'm not making this up. Think of how people reacted to my plan in both parties. The strategic flaw is this. This president believes if we surge force, have military power increased, we can do what? Give breathing room to the parties, right? You heard that phrase 100 times. What's the purpose of giving the parties breathing room? It will allow them to reach an agreement among themselves how to establish a multi-ethnic, multi-religious, democratic central government in Baghdad. What do the Democrats say? Most of the Democrats say that the reason we should begin to leave Iraq, or leave Iraq now, is it will force the Iraqis to have to come to their milk, as my farmers say. It will force the Iraqis to realize they've got to settle this among themselves. How? A multi-ethnic, strong, central, democratic government in Iraq. Well, I'm here to tell you what you've heard me say for the last 4.5 years. There is no possibility in the lifetime of anyone in this room of there being a multi-ethnic, multi-religious, strong central democratic government in Iraq. From the day before he went to work, and I'm not Monday morning quarterbacking, go to my website, joebiden.com. I wrote a report 6 months before we went to war, predicting, awful self-serving thing to say in the interest of time, exactly what would happen if we went to war. Some of you recently read Tom Friedman, when pushed and pushed and pushed by Wolf Blitzer, as to who's been right in Iraq. He said Joe Biden's been the one right in Iraq from the very beginning. Now that's self-serving, but here's the reason I tell you that. I argued and wrote a report 6 months before we went to war saying, it's not a question of the day. Remember I was talking about the day after Saddam falls, what happened? I wrote a report saying the decade after. And the decade after meant we were going to need to have, I argued, hundreds of thousands of troops in Iraq for a minimum of 5 years to probably 10 years. That was going to cost hundreds of billions of dollars. That there would be no oil to pay for this war. That there would be a civil war. That there would in fact be no competent government to stand up. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I sought out the smartest people in the world. And they knew it. And I got pilloried for laying it out. But here's the point I want to make to you. From that moment, it was clear to me that if we did go to Iraq, that it was going to be there was only one possible solution that would allow us a way out. The fundamental problem in Iraq predictably was and has become a self-sustaining cycle of sectarian violence. Self-sustaining. This is not about Al-Qaeda. This is not about jihadis. It is a civil war.